Today we're talking about it. Not that it or that one or that one. Like literally the word IT. No, not that IT. This has nothing to do with resetting your email password for the 12th time. We're actually talking about the word it. This script has the potential to turn into an Abbott and Costello routine. Hopefully it doesn't end up being too confusing, which, as we'll talk about later, is actually one of the problems with it. Prior to a few weeks ago, I never gave the word it much thought. To me, it was always kind of a utility word, not something I ever gave much thought to. But a recent critique on a piece of my writing changed everything when someone pointed out a problem with a sentence where I use a couple of the now dreaded its. I suddenly realized how dangerous this word can be, and after some consideration, I saw that overuse of it can lead to other problems with your prose. I set out to do some research on this and didn't find a lot of information about it, beyond something like a definition. Mind you, Googling it tends to bring up some horrific results. Now, I'm certainly not the first person to notice this. I think I just wasn't able to find any places where folks were talking about this issue. That being said, I don't think it's a widely discussed topic by any means. Is this clear when I'm saying it here? Like I'm using it to refer to it, and that's just frying my brain. So let's talk about it and some of the problems that surround its use, and also why I think you should do your best to avoid it whenever possible. The most basic definition of it, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, is a pronoun used to refer to a thing previously mentioned or easily identified. Remember the easily identified part. We'll talk about that a bit later. So in essence, it is basically a replacement for a noun, usually. It can also be used in situations where the agent of a verb is not known or unimportant. Something like "it is raining" tells us what is happening but doesn't identify the agent, the thing that's making it rain. There's also some other uses of it, like shifting the emphasis around in a sentence. The important point here is that it refers to something without explicitly identifying the something. Sometimes because the something is unknown or unimportant, and sometimes because the something is known and established. It is essentially a pronoun that refers to objects rather than people, and this is where some of the problems start to creep in. Before we get to why it can sometimes be a problem, I want to emphasize that this isn't necessarily a grammatical problem. It is perfectly legal to use from a language perspective in most cases. That's not the issue. The issue is the effect it can have on the prose and potentially on reader comprehension. Using too many its robs you of opportunities to describe the objects you're referring to. Besides just being kind of a boring word, every time you use an it, you are not using a descriptive noun or adjective to describe the scene. I made a video a while ago about the most important part of a sentence. And spoiler alert, the most important part of a sentence is usually the verb, at least according to me. Because the verb is where you, the writer, have the most flexibility when it comes to word choice, it becomes really important to select the right one. Most of the time, the subject of a sentence is either a character name or a pronoun, which you don't have a lot of flexibility with usually. This just leaves the verb and the description of the object to create variety in the sentence. And this is one of the major problems with it. If you replace the description of an object with it, not only are you instead using a kind of boring word that doesn't really add anything, but you're also missing a chance to describe the object in more detail. When you get right down to it, prose is actually kind of stingy when it comes to giving the writer opportunities to express information. And overuse of its remove one of those scant opportunities. You've given up a chance to tailor a description any way you want, and instead are stuck with a two-letter word. Of course, this can be overdone, I should warn you about that, but simple replacements of its with descriptions or alternative ways to describe something can add a lot of oomph to your writing. Something like he jumped onto the horse and kicked it to a gallop becomes a little more interesting when the it gets replaced. Something like he jumped onto the horse and kicked the cursed animal into a gallop, or he jumped onto the horse and kicked the nervous beast into a gallop, are both versions of that sentence with the it replaced by a more concrete description of the horse. Replacing the it opens up a wealth of opportunities to describe the object in more detail. You can describe both the state of the object, that was the nervous beast example, and the subject's opinion of that object. That was the cursed animal example. And you can do this without adding a whole lot of extra fluff to the sentence. Another advantage of this technique is it means you're less likely to confuse the reader. One of the things I mentioned in the definition of it is that it refers to a noun that is already established and identified. If the it that you, the author, are referring to and the it that the reader thinks you're referring to are different, then you're going to have problems. Now, this problem is not limited to it. In fact, anytime you use a pronoun, you risk confusing the reader. If you have two or more he, she's, or theys in a given sentence, then the reader is unlikely to know which he, she, or they you are referring to. The critique I mentioned at the beginning, which spurred the creation of this entire video, was on a sentence that I wrote which had two its in it. And these its referred to two different objects. And this was incredibly stupid of me. Not only was I missing a descriptive opportunity, but I was opening up the reader to massive confusion. I'm very glad that my critique partner found this issue because it opened up all of the problems that surround the use of the word it that I was ignorant to up to this point. So should you go through your manuscript and remove all the its? The answer to that is no, you shouldn't. As I mentioned at the beginning, it is perfectly okay to use, and any well-written story is probably going to have tons of its in it. What you should do instead is give each it some careful consideration. Ask yourself if there's another way to describe the object without using the it. Ask yourself if you're using it in a way that will confuse the reader, and also see if the it can be removed from the sentence entirely. That's another problem with its that I didn't mention before. They tend to sneak into sentences when they aren't actually needed and can be removed without breaking anything. Unlike the transition to the conclusion, which is very much needed. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the advice in it useful. If you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all my other writing advice related videos and subscribe to my channel. I post new videos every Wednesday. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. There's no its in that part of the conclusion.